In the chaos and turmoil of World War II, amidst the relentless battles and the clash of armies, there emerged a force shrouded in mystery and intrigue. They were the masters of deception, the shadows that moved in silence, one of the first ever special forces to be assembled. From the deserts of North Africa to the forests of Eastern Europe, their presence was felt across every theatre of war. They disguised themselves, spoke multiple languages, and adapted to any environment, making them one of the most formidable units of their time. These were the Brandenburgers of the Wehrmacht, Germany's elite special forces, trained in espionage, sabotage, and guerrilla warfare. They infiltrated enemy lines, executed daring missions, and altered the course of battles. Join us as we delve into the untold stories, the daring exploits, and the strategic efforts of the Brandenburgers of the Wehrmacht. Discover how their covert operations left an indelible mark on the history of warfare. For 10 relentless days, war had engulfed the region, with Wehrmacht divisions relentlessly advancing through Poland like an unstoppable flood. Amid the chaos, throngs of civilians and Polish soldiers desperately fled before the enemy's onslaught. In Dęblin, a pivotal railway bridge, essential for the German forces' strategic momentum, still stood unscathed. One Polish unit, however, upheld a disciplined martial spirit, impeccably uniformed and marching proudly while singing a Polish army anthem. They reached the bridge amidst the throngs of panicked refugees. Swiftly, the non-commissioned officer leading them located the commander of the pioneers tasked with the bridge's demolition. The pioneer commander, surprised by their arrival, attempted to contact his superior but discovered the communication lines had been severed by enemy action. Suddenly, a Ju-87 Stuka dive-bombing raid forced everyone to scramble for cover. The generous offer to assume responsibility for the bridge was swiftly and gratefully accepted, prompting the original guards to depart quickly. When the Germans arrived about 5 hours later, the new demolition team incited panic to clear the bridge. After successfully handing over control to the advancing panzers, their task was complete, leaving them with nothing to do but change back into their German uniforms. This event marked one of the earliest uses of special forces by Germany during World War II. The demolition guard comprised men meticulously chosen from Upper Silesia, who were often more proficient in Polish than in German. The success of their operations behind enemy lines hinged on their exceptional cunning and aptitude for subterfuge, qualities fostered through top-tier training and unconventional thinking. From the outset of the war, the German High Command recognized the value of deceit and infiltration, employing these tactics effectively. The core of Blitzkrieg strategy focused on dislocating and disrupting enemy defensive positions rather than methodically destroying their forces. To sustain rapid advances, it was crucial for armoured and motorised infantry units to secure vital road and rail junctions, tunnels, and, most importantly, bridges. Parachutists alone could not ensure the capture of these strategic points. Thus, by 1939, several specialised organisations had already been established to achieve these critical objectives. Foremost among these specialised groups was one established by the German intelligence and counterintelligence service, the Abwehr. Rapidly expanding from January 1935, the Abwehr was led by Admiral Wilhelm Canaris, a sophisticated and astute officer with World War I experience and a talent for languages. By 1939, the Abwehr was divided into 3 sections. Abwehr 1 handled espionage and intelligence gathering, Abwehr 2 focused on sabotage and special units, and Abwehr 3 managed counterintelligence. However, they often found themselves in competition with the SS's security service, the Sicherheitsdienst SD, commanded by the notorious Reinhard Heydrich. Within Abwehr 2, the initial commander of Special Forces was Captain Theodor von Hippel, who had closely studied the effective use of commandos in Germany's African colonies during World War I and was well versed in the writings of T.E. Lawrence, Lawrence of Arabia. Von Hippel began recruiting a small contingent of German fighters from border regions like the Sudetenland of Czechoslovakia and the Silesian districts of Poland. He also sought Germans with experience living abroad in Africa or South America, individuals familiar with the languages and customs of potential adversaries. Additionally, he prioritized candidates possessing essential qualities for Special Forces soldiers: self-reliance, imagination, and an unconventional mindset not typically found in regular military personnel. Every recruit had to be a volunteer, as only volunteers possessed the dedication required to face the near-certain execution that came with capture during covert operations. In 1939, Hippol's men formed a singular unit called the No. 1 Construction Training Company. These soldiers, most of whom were fluent in Polish, played a pivotal role in the early stages of the war, their success ensuring their continued deployment in future missions. Just east of the border in southwest Poland was the crucial railway junction of Katowice. Before the invasion commenced, 80 men infiltrated Poland, posing as Polish railway workers to blend in and move freely around the rail network without arousing suspicion. As the invasion began, they revealed their hidden weapons and attacked the unsuspecting Polish forces. The deception was so convincing that one group even managed to persuade a contingent of Polish troops to board a train, which they then redirected to a rail siding far from the conflict. The operation was entirely successful, allowing German forces to establish control over Katowice Junction. The facility remained intact, with all its rolling stock in excellent condition, crucial for the German army, which depended heavily on the railway system for their operations. Unfortunately for the Germans, not all operations during the invasion of Poland went as smoothly. Other units failed to prevent the destruction of key bridges over the river Vistula at Dirschau and Graudenz. A near catastrophe struck another group assigned to capture the Jablonka tunnel. Due to a missed order delaying the operation, the soldiers opened fire hours before the invasion was officially set to begin. The Poles retaliated fiercely, chasing the Germans across the countryside while the two nations were still technically at peace. To maintain appearances, the German government issued a denial, attributing the incident to Slovakian terrorists. Despite these setbacks, the German High Command was highly impressed with the overall results of these operations and decided to expand and develop the concept further. At the end of the year, the various groups were consolidated at Brandenburg am Havel and formally designated as Baulehr Kompanie ZBV 800, 800th Construction Training Company for Special Purposes on October 25th. Named after the town west of Berlin where they were stationed, the Brandenburg Commandos quickly grew to battalion strength and underwent rigorous training in commando and parachute techniques. Their organisation and training were further solidified in April 1940 as they participated in the invasions of Norway and Denmark, and later played a significant role during the invasion of the Low Countries. The Germans could not afford delays in Holland and needed a swift capitulation to advance towards defeating France. The Brandenburgers were perfectly suited for this task, and on the night of May 9, 1940, they crossed the border. Again, a railway bridge was a primary target, this time located just inside the Dutch border at Gennep, directly in the path of the 9th Panzer Division, the sole armoured unit participating in the invasion of the Netherlands. The seizure of the bridge was crucial, and the plan involved a sophisticated deception. 10 minutes before the planned attack, a group of 7 German prisoners, escorted by 2 Dutch guards, arrived at the bridge. Upon receiving a signal, they attacked the guard post. Despite the ensuing gunfire that wounded 3 Brandenburgers, the mission proceeded. The commandos, along with their Dutch accomplices, advanced to capture the post at the far end of the bridge. The guards were taken by such complete surprise that they did not know how to react. A grenade effectively neutralized them, allowing the commandos to seize control of the detonator that could have destroyed the bridge as the first tanks arrived. Unfortunately, the commander was mistaken for a Dutchman by the lead vehicle and was cut down by machine gun fire, though he later survived to receive the Iron Cross. Further acts of boldness and intense aggression led to the successful capture of other crucial bridges at Roermond and Stavelot. On May 27th, as German forces neared Ostende and Belgium was on the verge of surrender, 13 commandos disguised in Belgian infantry uniforms infiltrated a chaotic crowd in a captured Belgian army bus. They manoeuvred through the turmoil until reaching the bridge at sunset. Under the cover of darkness, 2 commandos crawled across the bridge, cutting the explosive charges, while machine gun fire echoed overhead. Upon reaching the far side, they opened fire, allowing their comrades to charge the bridge, employing submachine guns and hand grenades to neutralize the defenders. The attackers swiftly isolated and subdued the remaining enemy forces, securing both the bridge and the pump houses intact. The Brandenburgers had demonstrated immense success, and during the summer of 1940 they prepared to play a significant role in the anticipated invasion of the United Kingdom. When this operation did not come to fruition, they relocated to Quincy for intensive training and expansion to regimental strength. New recruits were trained in all special forces skills with a particular focus on deception techniques. Regularly parading in foreign uniforms, they emphasized developing strong camaraderie within their small, tight-knit groups. In the Brandenburg Regiment, soldiers greeted their officers with a handshake rather than a salute, fostering discipline based on trust rather than strict obedience. Initiative was encouraged from the outset of a recruit's career, with exercises such as obtaining the fingerprints of the local police chief without his knowledge. Later, recruits were tasked with capturing 10 Wehrmacht soldiers within 5 hours and bringing them to Quincy. This seemingly relaxed and unconventional approach to military life did not endear them to many. After contributing to the swift occupation of the Balkans, the regiment, now consisting of 3 battalions and several independent companies, saw their unorthodox methods yield significant results in their most challenging assignment yet, Operation Barbarossa, the invasion of the Soviet Union. Although the operation officially began on the early morning of June 22, 1941, many Brandenburgers had already infiltrated enemy territory the previous day following their established tactics, wearing Soviet coats over their field grey uniforms and driving trucks captured from the Soviets by the Finns during the Winter War. Each detachment was led by a fluent Russian speaker. However, they were unaware of the Soviet passwords for the night, arousing suspicion among the border guards of a potential German attack. Under strict orders not to open fire before the main assault began, the Brandenburgers had no choice but to flee if their attempts to talk their way through failed. This resulted in several casualties when evasion proved unsuccessful. Nevertheless, many commandos successfully infiltrated and positioned themselves to exploit the ensuing chaos on the morning of the attack, joining the advance into the rear areas of the Soviet forces. A typical operation during the first week of the invasion was the capture of a crucial bridge within the Pripyat marshes on June 27th. A conventional armoured columns approach would have prompted the defenders to demolish the bridge, making stealth essential for this special forces mission. After an extremely arduous journey in captured Soviet trucks, it was clear that the mission would be both difficult and dangerous. The sight of any armoured units would trigger the demolition of the bridge. The regimental commander informed the Brandenburgers that he could not bring his forces any closer than a 15-minute driving distance from the objective. Consequently, it became immediately apparent that once the Brandenburgers seized the bridge, they would have to hold it for at least a quarter of an hour against all surrounding Soviet troops. An even more pressing challenge was reaching the bridge. A variation on traditional deception was devised. The men would drive toward the bridge in 2 Soviet trucks, wearing Red Army greatcoats and carrying Soviet rifles, while concealing machine pistols underneath. By approaching from the sunset at dusk, they planned to be silhouetted in the long shadows of a summer evening on the steppes. Meanwhile, German infantry patrols would maintain pressure on the retreating Soviet troops converging towards the bridge. Artillery and Stuka bombardment heightened the confusion and panic, creating the ideal chaos for the mission. The Brandenburgers planned to shout that they were being closely pursued by panzers. One truck would cross the bridge while the second would appear to break down on the far bank. The Brandenburgers would then try to persuade the demolition guard to delay blowing up the bridge until their comrades could cross. Amid the confusion, they would locate the demolition charges. Once the second truck had limped onto the bridge, they would throw off their greatcoats and seize the span intact. The attack began with a Stuka raid, their sirens wailing to instill terror among the defenders. The deception was enhanced by carefully coordinating artillery fire to follow the trucks, despite setting off at speed. The Brandenburgers' approach slowed to a crawl due to the press of frightened bodies near the bridge, with many fleeing Soviet soldiers attempting to clamber aboard the trucks. As the first truck crossed the bridge and the second slowed to a halt, the Brandenburgers were prepared to fend off the Soviets with their rifle butts. The German leader managed to locate the demolition guard commander and engaged in a heated argument to prevent him from detonating the charges, while the commandos quickly and discreetly searched for and disconnected them. 2 hours later, the objective was finally secured with the arrival of the main armoured force after enduring fierce counterattacks by waves of desperate Soviets, supported by mortars and artillery. The armoured column encountered significant difficulties, with a mechanical breakdown blocking the only approach route. Dense oak woods on either side prevented quick evasion of the obstacle, necessitating pioneers to clear a path. The 2nd Panzer moved ahead but drove directly into artillery fire, causing further blockages. 2 more panzers were lost, and air support was unavailable as smoke laid to cover the advance was dispersed by unfavourable winds. With annihilation imminent, a Stuka unit, whose original mission had been aborted, came to their rescue. The Stuka's bombs pinned the Soviets in their positions, allowing the panzers to advance toward the objective. 2 panzers managed to break through and cross the bridge. As the night progressed, additional armoured units arrived, finally securing the bridge and ensuring the success of the mission. Few among the line troops of the Wehrmacht were aware of what had transpired as the Brandenburgers quietly collected their dead and vanished into the night. Once again, they had secured the advance that would drive deep into the heart of Soviet Russia. Following these spectacular raids in the early stages of the invasion, the Brandenburgers continued to strike targets in the enemy's rear. They were employed extensively during the summer offensive of 1942, particularly in the Caucasus, where their unique skills and tactics were crucial to the German advance. In Ukraine, the Brandenburgers collaborated with the volunteer Ukrainian unit known as Ukrainische Gruppe Nachtigall to support Heeresgruppe Süd. These combined forces achieved significant success, although some actions by certain Ukrainian units were considered controversial. Despite these issues, their joint operations were highly effective in their objectives. In early August 1942, a Brandenburger unit consisting of 62 Baltic and Sudeten Germans, led by Freiherr Adrian von Völkersam, ventured deeper into enemy territory than any other German unit had managed. Their mission was to capture and secure the strategically crucial Maikop oil fields. Disguised as feared NKVD officers and using Soviet trucks, Völkersam's unit successfully breached the Soviet front lines and advanced far into hostile territory. As part of Operation Shamil, the Brandenburgers continued to conduct operations deep behind Soviet lines, executing commando missions in the Grozny area. Their activities included sabotage, intelligence gathering, and disruption of Soviet supply lines, which played a crucial role in the overall German strategy on the Eastern Front. The Brandenburgers' expertise in unconventional warfare allowed them to significantly impact Soviet operations in the region, despite the constant dangers and challenges they faced behind enemy lines. Operating under the false identity of NKVD Major Truchin from Stalingrad, Völkersam convinced the Soviet commander in charge of Maikop's defences that his mission was to recover deserters. The commander, trusting Völkersam, even provided a personal tour of the city's defences the following day. By August 8th, with German forces only 12 miles away, the Brandenburgers initiated their plan. They used grenades to create the illusion of an artillery attack, successfully disabling the city's military communications centre. Völkersam then informed the Russian defenders that a withdrawal was in progress. Having seen Völkersam with their commander and unable to communicate to verify his claim, the Soviets began evacuating Maikop. As a result, the German spearhead entered the city unopposed on August 9, 1942. This is just one example among the hundreds of missions carried out by the Brandenburgers during the advance into Russia. Their operations spanned a wide range of activities, including sabotage, intelligence gathering, and direct combat engagements, all of which significantly contributed to the German war effort on the Eastern Front. The Brandenburgers' ability to operate covertly and effectively behind enemy lines made them a formidable force, consistently executing daring and strategic missions throughout the campaign. By 1943, the most common mission assignment for the Brandenburgers had become long-range reconnaissance. During the 1942 advance of Heeresgruppe Süd in Ukraine, the Brandenburgers resumed their early campaign roles, moving ahead of the panzer columns. They seized bridges, road and rail junctions, and targeted the Soviet command and control infrastructure. Typically, these missions were carried out by units of 20 to 60 Brandenburgers, who disguised themselves as Soviet soldiers and used captured Red Army vehicles. Their efforts were crucial in disrupting Soviet defences and facilitating the rapid advance of German forces. Between January and April 1943, the Brandenburgers were expanded to the size of a division, incorporating specialized sub-units for U-boat crews, air defense, artillery, tank, anti-tank, and combat engineering. To build these capabilities, men were transferred from the Afrika Korps and Kriegsmarine, bringing with them a wide range of expertise and experience. By late 1942, the majority of the Brandenburg Regiment was assigned to fire brigade duties, functioning as elite infantry to fill critical gaps in the German lines. In February 1943, the Brandenburgers were withdrawn from the front and returned to Germany for expansion into Division Brandenburg. The division's first commander was to be General Major Alexander von Pfuhlstein. This newly formed division comprised 4 regiments. 1 regiment was sent back to the Eastern Front to continue its fire brigade role. A battalion was dispatched to Africa to persist in harassing Allied forces in the Mediterranean. The remaining elements of the division were deployed to the Balkans to conduct anti-partisan operations. This reorganization aimed to enhance the division's operational flexibility and effectiveness across multiple theatres of the war. In the spring of 1941, Canaris established the Brandenburg Africa Company. This unit comprised 60 volunteers, each with extensive experience in Africa and selected for their personal resilience and linguistic abilities. The unit's primary role was reconnaissance, conducting short penetrations of British front lines to gather intelligence and disrupt enemy operations. One remarkable mission involved inserting agents into Cairo by traversing some of the harshest deserts in the region, crossing the Great Sand Sea between Libya and Egypt. The commandos endured intense hardships and successfully completed the journey. However, their efforts were thwarted when British counterintelligence quickly apprehended the agents. Following the Axis offensive's success in June 1942, plans were made to seize key bridges on the Nile and Suez Canal using the Brandenburgers' traditional tactics. However, the failure to breach the main British defensive position and the subsequent defeat at El Alamein forced a rapid German retreat to Tunisia. The Brandenburgers were tasked with disrupting British supply lines to the First Army in western Tunisia and launched glider assaults against 2 bridges. Unfortunately, the operation ended in disaster. On May 6, 1943, the specialists were ordered to withdraw from Africa, but many were left stranded due to inadequate transportation and ultimately finished the war as prisoners. The Brandenburgers' most notable success in the eastern Mediterranean occurred on the island of Leros. The island was garrisoned by a brigade of British troops and about 5,500 Italians, who had switched to the Allied side. The Italian troops, being of very low calibre, were not expected to offer significant resistance. The operation commenced with heavy aerial bombardment, followed by a seaborne assault from 2 sides and a supporting parachute drop aimed at splitting the defenders. A parachute company of Brandenburgers was attached to the 1st Battalion, 2nd Parachute Regiment, and they were dropped after a 12-hour delay at 1 p.m. on November 12, 1943. They faced heavy anti-aircraft fire as they descended onto a narrow strip of land between Gurna and Alinda Bays, intending to split the island's defences. However, the drop zone, less than half a mile wide, was defended by the 2nd Battalion Royal Irish Fusiliers. By dropping from an altitude of 450 feet, the parachutists quickly reached the ground and hastily organised. 2 companies secured the position from the north and east, while the other 2 attacked Rachi Ridge. The Eastern Task Force faced significant challenges as the Brandenburgers' Küstenjäger coastal raider detachments were initially unable to land due to heavy fire from Italian-manned coastal batteries. A coordinated Stuka raid and the deployment of smokescreens eventually allowed them to get ashore. They landed on the north side of Pandeli Bay while the convoy made its way to Alinda Bay. Despite losing 1 boat to gunfire, the Brandenburgers reached the cliffs and successfully scaled them to attack their objective, Mount Apatitsi. They called in close air support, but the initial strike accidentally hit the Germans before demolishing the defences. As they launched their assault, intense mortar and machine gun fire stalled the commandos, resulting in all the officers being killed or wounded. Another airstrike was called, but it again mistakenly targeted the Brandenburgers, forcing them to pull back and regroup. In a council of war, they decided that while the main objective could not be taken, they could seize the Italian battery at Castle Hill, which they quickly accomplished using hand grenades. For 3 days, the Küstenjägers held their captured positions. Throughout the nights, the British maintained artillery harassment, and several attempts to storm the German position were repelled. Both sides sent out patrols, and the Germans were resupplied by airdrops of water, ammunition, and mortars, a valuable addition to their armament. Reinforcements were brought up to the ridge. The location of the British headquarters at Mount Meraviglio was known, and additional forces were needed to secure its capture. This effort continued despite determined counterattacks by British infantry, who were isolated from each other in the north and south of the island. On the 14th and 15th, the British relentlessly attacked the thin line held by the parachutists across the centre of the island. The Küstenjägers repelled an assault by 3 companies using mortar and machine gun fire, prompting the British to shift their efforts to Rachi Ridge and Mount Germano. Despite being exhausted by constant Stuka attacks, the British managed to regroup, link up and retake Germano. Control of the village of St. Nicola was critical. If the British could capture it, the German forces around Leros would be effectively trapped. Vicious hand-to-hand combat ensued. But the Germans, having a numerical advantage, forced the British out of the sparse stone houses. As the operation entered its 4th day, the German command feared losing momentum. Consequently, the 3rd Battalion of the Brandenburgers 1st Regiment was ordered to Leros. The battalion landed at 2 AM on the 16th and swiftly captured the heights south of Leros town. As dawn rose, the Brandenburgers set their sights on their next objective, Mount Meraviglia and the British headquarters. Despite sustaining significant losses, they advanced across the bare rock-strewn slopes, overrunning anti-aircraft and field defences, and engaging in further hand-to-hand combat against the determined defenders. By 3 PM, the battle was over, though the 3rd Battalion's commanding officer was seriously wounded. A patrol then linked up with the Küstenjägers on Castle Hill to launch the final assault on the British headquarters. Ultimately, the British commander surrendered to the Brandenburgers. By October 1942, the Brandenburgers had expanded to divisional strength. However, as German advances were halted and partisans began to operate in the rear areas, the Brandenburgers increasingly found themselves tasked with suppressing resistance. The Germans had occupied a vast expanse of Soviet territory, within which partisans thrived. These guerrilla fighters persistently attacked Wehrmacht supply lines, employing hit-and-run tactics and exploiting the dense cover provided by forests and marshes. By early 1943, the partisan threat had become serious. While regular troops could defend key points and installations, chasing the partisans into their strongholds and destroying them seemed an obvious task for the Brandenburgers, given their training in irregular warfare. The commander ranks had swelled with citizens from occupied territories who were disaffected with their own political situations. A notable group of Ukrainians, known as the Nightingale Group, had played a crucial role in the initial invasion of the Soviet Union by capturing the town of Przemysl and the bridge over the San River. Eventually, each Brandenburg battalion had a company of Eastern Volunteers attached to it. However, using the Brandenburgers in a counter-insurgency role proved to be a mistake, despite their apparent qualifications. On May 25, 1944, specialist members of the Division Brandenburg, attached to SS Fallschirmjäger Battalion 500, participated in Operation Russelsprung, an airborne mission aimed at capturing Yugoslav partisan leader Josip Broz Tito at his headquarters near Durva. The goal was to eliminate the communist resistance in the Balkans. However, Tito managed to escape just before the SS Fallschirmjäger reached his cave headquarters. The SS paratroopers were then forced to withdraw to the town cemetery, where they entrenched themselves and endured a night of intense partisan attacks. German casualties included 213 killed, 881 wounded and 51 missing, while German wartime estimates placed partisan casualties at about 6,000. SS Fallschirmjäger BTL 500 was nearly annihilated during this operation. One of 4 instances where this unit and its successor SS Fallschirmjäger BTL 600 were almost completely destroyed between November 1943 and May 1945. Since the outset, Admiral Canaris and the Abwehr were closely monitored by Himmler's SS, particularly by Walter Schellenberg, the chief of Amt 6, Ausland SD, which constituted the foreign intelligence branch of the SD. The SS's surveillance of the Abwehr was part of a broader effort to consolidate control over all intelligence activities within the Reich, ensuring that Canaris and his operations remained under constant scrutiny. The anti-Nazi sentiments within the Abwehr culminated in July 1944, when several high-ranking officials, including Admiral Canaris, were implicated in the July 20th plot to assassinate Hitler. Following this, control of the Brandenburg Division was transferred to the SD. However, by September 1944, it was determined that special operations units were no longer necessary. Consequently, the Brandenburg Division was reorganized as Infantry Division Brandenburg (MOT), a motorized infantry division, and was redeployed to the Eastern Front. This transformation marked a significant shift in the division's role and capabilities as it transitioned from specialized commando operations to conventional infantry engagements. A total of 1,800 men, including Freiherr Adrian von Völkersam, successfully secured transfers to SS Standartenführer Otto Skorzeny's 502nd SS Jäger Battalion. These soldiers continued to operate as special forces within SS Jagdverband Mitte and predominantly within SS Jagdverband Ost until the end of the war. This move allowed them to maintain their expertise in unconventional warfare and special operations, despite the reorganization and redeployment of the Brandenburg Division. For the remainder of the division, the shift back to conventional operations adversely affected morale. Despite this, the Brandenburgers were still regarded as an elite force. Consequently, they were assigned to Panzerkorps Großdeutschland, alongside their former training partner from 1940 to 1941, the Großdeutschland Division. The Brandenburgers demonstrated their combat prowess on the Eastern Front, participating in the fighting retreat through the Baltic states and into East Prussia. Their performance in these engagements underscored their status as a formidable military unit, even in the face of challenging circumstances and changing roles. In late 1944, the division was equipped with a panzer regiment and redesignated as Panzer Grenadier Division Brandenburg before returning to the front. The Brandenburgers were engaged in intense combat near Memel until their withdrawal, along with the Großdeutschland Division via ferry to Pillau. The division faced near total destruction during the fierce fighting near Pillau. While some survivors managed to surrender to the British in Schleswig-Holstein in May, many Brandenburgers, owing to their advanced skills in evading detection, simply disappeared. Also, what's interesting, the Brandenburg Commandos were originally formed for offensive operations, and while their skills led to some remarkable successes, their effectiveness was undermined by the time wasted on incessant patrolling. Earlier in 1944, their morale plummeted as their missions shifted from bold assaults to mere containment. Heavy losses and political maneuvering further eroded their cohesion. As a result, many Brandenburgers left to join a commando unit formed by SS Colonel Otto Skorzeny in the Waffen-SS, seeking to continue their specialized operations under his command. Otto Skorzeny was a notable figure in World War II, serving as a Waffen-SS officer in Nazi Germany. Born on June 12, 1908 in Vienna, Austria, Skorzeny gained prominence through his involvement in special operations. One of his most famous missions was the daring rescue of Italian dictator Benito Mussolini in 1943, which earned him significant recognition and the Knight's Cross of the Iron Cross. Skorzeny's reputation as Hitler's commando was further solidified by his participation in various other covert operations, including Operation Greif during the Battle of the Bulge, where German soldiers dressed in American uniforms to cause confusion behind enemy lines. Despite his controversial and dangerous missions, Skorzeny was a skilled and strategic operator, often referred to as one of the most dangerous men in Europe during the war. After the war, Skorzeny was captured by Allied forces and tried at the Dachau trials for war crimes, including his role in Operation Greif. However, he was acquitted in 1947, partly due to the lack of direct evidence and the support of his former adversaries, who testified that similar tactics were used by both sides during the war. While awaiting further trials, Skorzeny managed to escape from an internment camp in 1948 with the help of former SS colleagues. He fled to Spain, which was then under Franco's dictatorship, and lived there under the protection of the regime. Skorzeny became involved in various business ventures, including acting as a security consultant for different countries and allegedly serving as a liaison for Nazi fugitives. Back in 1944, Skorzeny later employed many of the techniques that had been so effective in the early part of the war during the ill-fated Ardennes offensive in 1944. As the Eastern Front began to collapse, the need for anti-partisan warfare diminished. Despite their significant impact, the Brandenburgers are often overlooked in historical narratives. Several factors contribute to this relative obscurity. Firstly, the shadow of larger, more publicised units like the British SAS, which was formed in 1941, tends to overshadow the contributions of the Brandenburgers. Secondly, the post-war stigmatisation of all German military units, regardless of their specific roles or actions, has led to a general neglect in Western historiography. Lastly, the secretive nature of their operations meant that much of their work was classified or not well documented, further contributing to their historical invisibility. Nonetheless, the Brandenburgers were pioneering in their tactics and operational scope. They laid foundational strategies and techniques that influenced the development of modern special forces worldwide. Their legacy, while not as celebrated, is significant in the annals of military history, demonstrating the early use and effectiveness of special operations long before the widespread recognition of such units. Remembering the real history of units like the Brandenburgers is essential. It ensures a comprehensive understanding of military evolution and acknowledges the complexity of wartime actions beyond simplified narratives. By recognising their contributions, we honour the full spectrum of historical experiences and lessons, fostering a more nuanced appreciation of past conflicts and the development of modern military practices. One notable soldier was Oberleutnant Afhelt Eckard of the Jäger Regiment 2 of the Brandenburg Division. He was awarded the Knight's Cross for launching a surprise night attack on the village of Neuwiesewitz on January 31, 1945. The defending Soviet forces were quickly overrun. During the battle, attached Sturmgeschütze and Panzerjäger units destroyed several Soviet tanks in the village and nearby forest. This victory eliminated a major flank threat to Gruppe von Sauken's Oder River crossing at Neuvereichen. For this tactical success, Oberleutnant Afhelt was awarded the Knight's Cross. He survived the war and joined the Bundeswehr in 1956, where he played a key role in operating and creating special operations units and divisions within the new army. On August 10, 1942, Lieutenant Prochaska led 24 men from the 8th Lehr Regiment Brandenburg to capture a road bridge over the Belaya River. Disguised in Red Army uniforms, they travelled in 4 captured Soviet trucks and reached Belorochensk by 1700. Blending with the retreating Soviet forces, they were questioned by a Soviet general, but Prochaska's claim of guarding the bridge was convincing, and the Soviet general let them go. After crossing the bridge, which was rigged with explosives, they dismounted, armed with PPSH-41 SMGs. They killed the crew of a tanker truck, cut the demolition wires, and removed the explosives. 2 white flares signalled their success, prompting German panzer forces in Belorochensk to respond. 18 minutes later, the 1st German panzer attempted to cross but broke down, blocking the bridge for 50 minutes. During this time, Prochaska was shot, likely by a sniper. Eventually, the panzer was repaired and German troops crossed the bridge. Lieutenant Prochaska was posthumously awarded the Knight's Cross for securing this vital structure, but would pass away on August 9, 1942. And that brings our video to a close. I hope you learned something new about this significant yet often forgotten part of military history. If you enjoyed the content, please like and subscribe. A big thanks to my Patreon supporters. Links to my Patreon and Instagram can be found below. That's all for now. I hope to see you in the next video. Goodbye for now.